Okay, I have to make a video about this. I was looking at AJ Miller. I'm outside on my deck chair. I was watching a video just someone talking about this potential antichrist that they found, a Muslim guy, and I don't know. It kind of just made me feel like I need to make a specific post that specifies that there are kind of like three Jesuses. There's one that represents just the average person, one that is AJ Miller that inspired the Jesus character, and then there's this sort of third character that is kind of the Antichrist, because someone was talking about this guy who's calling himself the Antichrist, and this guy was saying that the Antichrist is America, it's a country. And no, I do not think that it's a country. The Antichrist is someone who declares themselves to be God. And therefore AJ Miller is not it, because he's not declaring himself to be God, and nor is this Muslim guy, because he too is not declaring himself as God. You know, an Antichrist is the Antichrist, not an Antichrist. An Antichrist is just someone who denies the real Christ. But yeah, I know that there's two interpretations of it, because people think that Jesus is Christ. So an Antichrist could be, in their Interpretation, someone who denies that Jesus is Christ, whereas in my telling, it's just someone who denies the real Christ is Christ, and that's me. But yeah, I thought I'd just make a post about that. And then when I was looking at this post, I kind of saw that I'd said that I believed that AJ Miller was an Anglo-Saxon king, because I got a vision of that when I was trying to think like what other lives. Like, I don't believe he's just had two lives. If all he has is just AJ Miller and now, well, I don't believe that's the case, because I believe that I specifically chose AJ Miller to be the character that he went on to be, and therefore I know that he had a life as a human before being selected. And perhaps because I strongly think that AJ Miller was on his third life, I think he had two lives before. Now I kind of realised that in the post I kind of put the first one as being like a sort of caveman thing. I think I just chose it because it was the same picture that I'd used for another picture that I was working on showing my son. So I had that picture as that being my son. But yeah, I've kind of just took that image rather than get another image. But I kind of, now that I feel like strongly that lives before 2000 and before 6,000 years ago, I think the Jewish calendar is supposed to be 6,000 years old, and the reason why is because any life after that is counted as a sort of human life, but any life before that, I don't think my higher self has really been counting that. I think there's been between when Eve came and 6,000 BC, I think there was like a long period of time where just lots of sort of cavemen people, early Homo sapiens lived, and this was kind of like the Matrix way of trying to test people to see how developed their soul were, and this helps put things in order. And I think also the souls were linked to Dala and who's most similar, and it kind of, the Matrix and the AI that we're living in, the sort of computer that we're living on, sorted out all the souls and put them in order as in who's most similar to Dala and her son. And then just lived, like, there was a big long period where the human body kind of changed. Like, I think in 20,000 BC, I think you'd lost your fur by that time, but I feel like you might have been shorter or just still quite hairy and still not thinking properly. I mean, I still don't think many people are thinking properly, but over time it's worked away, and then I kind of realized that Anglo-Saxons, I did think he was an Anglo-Saxon king, and then when I looked on Google I was like, wait, isn't Anglo-Saxon like after BC, in which case I put them in the wrong order. So either I put them in the wrong order, or I definitely feel like AJ Miller was chosen before he was Jesus of Nazareth. He had another life and he was chosen in that life, and so I was thinking sort of 5,000 BC is probably his first life as a human, and maybe he had another one as well. I'm sure that there might have been a female in there, because I think he has a female, and he has a female side to him, a feminine side to him. So I feel like he's had both a male and a female, which would have been his two first lives. If he lived less and then had three, I don't know, he could have had three, or because a life is from age 1 to 70, and then life 2 is age 72. So if you live for 100, technically by that standard you've lived 1.5 lives. I feel like that's the best way because if someone's lived one life and only lived 10 years, and someone's lived one life and lives 100 years, they can't be considered to be both people living their first life, because one you would expect to be more evolved. They've lived 100 years on Earth, and they've obviously evolved and learnt lots of things, so you can't really compare that person to someone who's. So I feel like that I've designed the Matrix to test and age people on how many years they've actually been alive, rather than the number of lives or bodies that they've had. I think when it comes to me, it's the number of bodies, just because I've had so few bodies that I think it's kind of depressing to think that I might only be 100 years, 26 and 21, and how old I am now, 37. So I'm that's all my life is. It's very, very short. So with me, I'm counting my lives as being just in my body, and the three, Darla, Alea, me, and then Lily in the future. So with me, I'm counting it that way. But I feel like with people on Earth, it's better to count it a different way, because there's going to be a lot of people having a lot of lives, and there's going to be some that have 10 years, and there's going to be some that have like 100 years, so I shouldn't be counting them as the same thing. But anyway, when I was trying to do that, I kind of thought, I think he's an Anglo-Saxon king, but I've obviously made a mistake, because Anglo-Saxon king is supposed to be 5th century onwards, 5th century to 500 AD AC to 1000 AC or something. That's supposed to be the sort of I definitely knew he was around that time. I definitely felt, not that time, I just felt like he was an Anglo-Saxon king, but I also felt like he had a life before being Jesus, and I feel like I just did it wrong, so I corrected it. I don't know, at the beginning I was just like, maybe I'm just wrong about that, because I was thinking, if AJ Miller has not had a life for 2000 years, you would actually expect him to have dyslexia, or you would expect him, because 2,000 years ago, like, education was really, really bad. There was no such thing as education. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't learn to read and write in that, or was very, very basic. I don't know what he learned, but I don't think he learned much in that life. And therefore, because of that, I started thinking, well, actually, I do think he might have had another life in between. AJ Miller, I think, has had a life in between now and 2,000 years. I mean, okay, he's not remembering it, and I think not having a life in between would make his memory of the other life clearer. But then I'm kind of thinking about myself, and I'm like, when it comes to Aaliyah, I have absolutely no memory of anything. If you were to give me a bunch of buildings that she lived in or that she didn't live in, and was trying to get me to guess which one she lived in, I probably would have no clue. I don't know. You could test me on it. That's what I would love to do when you first start. If you talk to me before I die, I would love you to just ask me questions about Aaliyah's life and see if I get them right. And I probably won't. If I have absolutely no clue, like if you give me 10 houses and say which one did she live in, and if I don't know, I wouldn't be surprised if I get it wrong, because I have literally no memory of being her, and therefore, but for some reason I have quite a strong, I feel like I get visions. I feel like I can hear the monkey sounds, and just how people were 23,000 years ago, which they weren't really people, but I feel like I had quite a lot of memories or connection with that life, but nothing with Aaliyah. And that kind of made me think, well, maybe AJ is going through a similar thing. He has a strong connection with this Jesus character that he was, this Jesus person that he was, but he's just got no memory of this other life that he had, which I think was Athelstan. I've never heard this name before. I don't know. I've looked up online, and actually it's supposed to mean noble stone, and that just reminded me that Jesus was supposed to be the stone that everyone rejected. And yeah, that kind of makes sense. If Jesus was like a guy who was foretelling his next life, when he's going to come back as a king and conquer, well, I'm in England, and this Athelstan guy because I had a vision of someone who he actually kind of looked feeble, to be honest. He looked skinny, a little bit like Jesus, only a bit more thicker hair, thicker beard, and but yeah, he looked like that picture that I showed and posted on Facebook. If you look up Athelstan, Athelstan, you will see a picture of someone, and that kind of reminded me of this vision that I had of him. And I was thinking it looked Anglo-Saxon. He looked Anglo-Saxon. I don't know what Anglo-Saxon actually means, but just the clothing and the swords, the shields. I mean, shields and the swords as well. Yeah, but everything that I was seeing seemed Anglo-Saxon. And then when I was trying to think, well, if this was 5000 BC, would this have really been that? I went to Dover Castle last week, and there was a really nice 12th century castle, and I don't think it was like that. I think it was a little bit less than that, but it was still similar to that. So it was like a smaller version of the Dover Castle. That's where he lived, and there was also other castle. There was the 3 castles near Dover Castle that I all went to, and this castle that I remember him living in, it kind of seemed more like that. And then when I was trying to think, I believe that he was here. He was chosen as Jesus around the 5th or 3rd century BC. But yeah, I don't think the images that I'm seeing don't seem to match with 5th century BC, 3rd century BC, but they do kind of match with this Athelstan guy who would have been 900 to 939. So I think I'm getting I got visions of someone, and it was also linking me to this castle that I saw. I can show pictures on Instagram, but I went to Dover Castle, and they had this really nice sort of 12th century setup with like an ancient 12th century bed and stuff like that. And I think he was living in slightly less. He had slightly less. The castles were not quite as developed, but they were almost like that. They were whatever you would expect 400 years before that to be. That's how it was like, and I'm just thinking that doesn't match up with the sort of 5th century, 3rd century that I thought I chose him for. So because of that, I now think that before he was Jesus of Nazareth, I think he had 2 lives. I don't know what the times back then were, very, very dark aged, but then I think he did come back, and I think he did conquer, because that's what he promised. He promised to come back and conquer, and I think that he might have been this guy, because this Athelstan guy was a conqueror, although he didn't actually gain most of his land. He didn't gain his title through conquering. He gained his title through Edward, who was his father, who owned lots of land. But I am very suspicious, because usually when kings die, they separate their land between like 2 rulers, but his half-brother died 16 days after Edward did. Now I know that maybe my higher self killed his half-brother so that this Athelstan will inherit all the land rather than the land being divided up. But yeah, I think back then, because there was when we went to Dover Castle, there was this little video clip that I saw, so I found was very interesting, because it was talking about like the invasion that happened around 12,000 BC, and before, I don't even know what age it was, but it was talking about the beginning of England, and it was talking about what England looked like before England was England, and it was just like lots of sort of divided up groups, and there was lots of fighting, lots of land conquering and territory. There was lots of this going on, and it kind of made me think that I don't know my history at all, because I don't know my history, but it was an interesting video that I saw that was talking about what England was like before it was England, and just all these battles. And I think actually was talking about when England was trying to conquer France. I'm sure it said that there was a whole section around France that it had conquered, and I think this was talking about the 12th century, but it was something some king came over and battled France and then lost all the land, but yeah, it kind of made me think that I don't know anything about the history and stuff. And so it's interesting that I've come across this Athelstan guy who was supposed to be the first English, because when I was trying to think like who was he in his past life, for some reason I feel strongly connected that his past life was in England. Like I definitely feel that he had a past life in England. And then it kind of occurred to me that if he was a king, then kings didn't exist before BC. Before BC, kings didn't exist. And so then that made me think even more reason why he might have had a life after Jesus. And then I just typed in what's the first king of England, and that was the name that came up, and that picture that I saw just looked like a vision that I'd had of him. And then if I'm kind of thinking about my daily life and like what I did last week, I went to Dover Castle, I saw this 12th century castle, and these quite nice beds actually that they had, and it was a nice kitchen as well. It was a very nice castle, and but yeah, I was taking an interest last week about the early stages, and I just feel like that happened, and me finding or seeing him and realizing that I haven't actually like specifically questioned who he was. I've stated that he's an Anglo-Saxon king, and I do think that he's an Anglo-Saxon king, but I've never really stated which one or why I think that. And it makes sense that it's this noble stone, this guy's name, which is a very unheard of name, which kind of makes sense. If people for thousands of years, or for 1,000 years, had been waiting for Jesus to come and arguing over Christianity, and then he comes called Noble Stone, and he does fight and he does battle, and yet no one remembers him because no one. Have you heard of King Athelstan? I've never heard of King Athelstan, but if he was supposed to like conquer England, well, England is Christ. My land is, I'm in England, and if the only reason why they've managed to join up eventually was because of someone like this. I don't know. I don't think it was really him who did it. I think it was his people. I think his people wanted to conquer land, and I think his people were fearing, the other side, or what the other groups might do. But I think most of it was actually most of his land was gained through inheritance of him being the child of a king. But it's interesting how his half brother, who might have gained land, actually died 16 days after the king that he inherited from. So that almost in a way seems like a murder plot. Kill the half brothers so that you can gain everything. I don't know if that was the case. Maybe it was just God that did that. I don't think this Athelstan was actually a particularly violent person or anything. I just think it was how I see the vision. Is I see him sitting on a throne actually, and there was when I went to Dover Castle, there was a really nice sort of 12th century stone, and I feel like I'm linking those visions with something that's slightly different, but I feel like I'm linking it to him, and yeah, his coronation was pretty big, and it's just, I'm linking these visions to my personal life, and I feel like maybe this has been set up so that I can just say that I think Jesus of Nazareth, A.J. Miller, was actually this king, but he himself has no memory of it. But yes, if I'm meeting him in a couple of weeks' time and I tell him this, how would he respond? I don't know. I don't know how he would respond to this, and it'd be interesting if he actually already knows about me and he's just watching my videos and he's just thinking, I can handle that news, I can believe that. It is different from what he's been preaching, but hey, I had no idea that I was Aliyah for like such a long time, so I don't know if this change in your story, I don't know, you don't have to accept it. I believe it, but you don't have to. But I just want to say that, and I want to see a film about it. I want to see a movie about this Athelstan who, personally I think he was a bit of a weak ruler, but I think he had some very strong people around him, and I just feel like whatever happened then is something that needs to happen now. So like, he might not be the strongest of Christ or strongest of leaders or whatever, but if he's got a bunch of strong people around him, then his the past is sometimes a picture or a dictation or a preparation, should I say, a preparation for something that's going to happen in the future. And I feel like what I want right now is to tell AJ Miller that, I want you to be this Jesus character. I need time to get over what the whole 12 years of people ignoring me. I need time to get over that. I want to have a life. I want to go on a cruise. I want to go to nice hotels and just have a reason to want to live. I need to find a reason to live before I can bother talking to people. And but I like the idea of Jesus rising up as the real Jesus, who wasn't born from a supernatural birth, wasn't. But yeah, I would like to add the story that I think he was this character, and that he came and that he conquered, and that all the prophecies about him coming and conquering. But yeah, really, I think the coming and conquering part that Athelstan did. I feel like it could be a preparation. If he has gone through that, even though he doesn't remember it, it might help or inspire people around him to do the same thing, only with the whole world. I want A.J. Miller to conquer the whole world as being the real Jesus, but yeah, not someone with supernatural powers, but rather just someone that was trying to teach you about the Christ consciousness, which, okay, is me, but the people don't have to accept me as Christ. But yeah, the Christ consciousness and opening up some sort of floodgate to get into heaven and to speak with the Spirit. I don't care what he says. Doesn't matter what he says. What I want to say is just that. And yeah, England is good being a whole. If someone hadn't come to conquer the whole of England and maybe Wales as well, and Scotland, England, Scotland, Wales, it's kind of all United Kingdom. I know this. I don't know the difference between Britain and United Kingdom. What's the difference between Britain and United Kingdom? Is Britain and United Kingdom the same? I don't even know that. Okay, my geography is shit. What is the difference between Britain and United Kingdom? I'm not sure, but I know that first England needed to be joined, and yes, and right now I need to join the whole Christian world. I could say join Christian with Muslim, but I wouldn't, because I don't agree with the Muslim beliefs. I don't agree with anything in it. So joining Christianity with Islam is only going to encourage Christians to be less similar or less connected to me, and I don't really want to do that. But if Muslims want to, if a Muslim leader wants to kind of like try and join Christianity to their religion, then they'd be turning the Muslims into something that's a bit more spiritually connected, which is a good thing. But yeah, it's not a good thing for the Christians, because Islam is inversion. So I wouldn't want people to come away from Christianity to go to, unless they want to become an animal in the next life. But yes, that's that's just